we have here Dylan Moscovitch. Dylan was an Olympic silver medalist in figure skating. He was an actor. He's still an actor. He's in broadcasting. He's a coach working on mindset, working on perspective, working on how to improve the overall life of everyone. He's an incredible person, so willing to share and give, and I think he's got a very unique perspective for life beyond his accomplishments and achievements. And so I'm so happy to have you here, Dylan, and we're all looking forward to this. Everyone is looking forward to this, and you got so much to give, and so I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I am actually not acting anymore.
Oh, you're not acting anymore.
No, no.
Well, then we'll have that noted in there. That's great, bro.
All good.
But Dylan, why don't you, if you're okay with it, tell us a little bit about your story up to date. Obviously, you're an incredible figure skater. I mean, you put a lot of determination and focus and time into that, and then what you're doing now a little bit, and how you've gotten to your point in life right now.
Yeah, sure. Um, so I grew up in Toronto. I started figure skating at the age, well, I started skating lessons, I guess, at the age of like 2, 3, around there. First time I skated, I was 13 months
Yeah.
old, just by chance. And yeah, I fell in love with it right away. I played competitive sports throughout my life, other sports, hockey and soccer and baseball. I did tennis camps. Soccer. I did, yeah, all sorts of stuff. Karate, snowboarding and skiing my whole life. Skating was always kind of how I identified. It was kind of, yeah, it was a no-brainer. It was just part of me, and I knew that from a very young age. I think as early as 5, I had said I wanted to go and win the Olympics. So that kind of set the trajectory for my life. Um, and I dove, all in and committed to that life. And for a good part of my career, until I was in my late teens, I wanted to be a single skater. I wanted to, I was following the lead of Kurt Browning and Elvis Stoiko,
Hmm.
my heroes, and growing up in the sport with them as the idols. It was, very inspiring. And then pairs kind of came into my field. I started skating pairs with my sister, and very quickly, um, things progressed. And there was a natural knack for that kind of area of figure skating. The relating part, I'm the oldest of four, and so that, I mean, skating with my sister also kind of enhanced and also challenged that aspect. Um, and I completely fell in love with pair skating and went on to let go of singles and really focus in on pairs. And I trained in Toronto and Barrie and Waterloo, and then back to Toronto skating with Kirsten Moore Towers, who's from St. Catharines, Ontario. That's who I went to the Olympics with. And then my last 4 years, I skated with Lubov Ilyashechkina, who moved from Russia to skate with me. Um, and so, yeah, I represented Canada for 18 years, and um, it was an incredible
Hmm.
journey with a lot of amazing, amazing experiences and successes, and a lot of heartbreaks, a lot of struggles, a lot of feeling of dejection, a lot of pain. I think that's the path of high level athletics, and mine was not exempt from that experience. And then when I retired, I went through a really, really tough shift.
Mm.
I threw myself into acting and broadcasting. I was coaching skating for figure skaters and for hockey, screenwriting. I was trying to find any way I could to express myself and honestly, and still be seen. Um, I think letting go of that aspect of being quote unquote special, like having something unique and different. I was identified as a figure skater. People introduced me as a figure
Hmm.
skater, and letting go of that was really challenging. So I was trying to find something that I guess society deemed in the same realm, and acting was like kind of similar. I also love the craft, but there was an aspect of me that maybe I hadn't really fully acknowledged was motivating me to do that. And then as the pandemic hit, I went through a deeper existential
Hmm.
crisis and took the time when we were stuck inside to go inside, and then a whole new phase of my life, a whole new journey opened up, and um, I've been on that journey ever since. The journey, the path of self-discovery, of really wanting to understand who am I, why am I, what am I, what makes me tick, what are the things that I carry from my life experience, from my familial life experience, and how do they affect the way I live. And what it's really done for me is given me some really interesting perspective on my life as an athlete, what it means to, perform under pressure, to really get to know your
Hmm.
mind. But from the athletic perspective, it's often like suppress everything else. And what I've found is through this different kind of inquiry that I've been on, um, is that there's no such thing. Like it gets put away in a box, but that box is connected to everything we do. And so when I work with young athletes, um, I really approach things through a lens of wholeness, of understanding that, we're here to enjoy this experience, whatever the sport is, whatever the craft is, whatever the art is, whatever the expression is. And we started doing it because we loved it, more than likely, unless we were pushed into it by our parents. But we started doing it because we loved it. And so that love creates um, a clearer path to freedom in the way that we can express and experience being in the field of play, and within that freedom gives us the opportunity to really play or really perform or really sorry, a wasp was on my foot, uh really perform, and not being like holding off the fear so much of failure, the fear of result and all of these things. And so yeah, I really try to approach this idea of getting into the nitty gritty of why am I doing this? Why am I not doing this? What is fueling that inspiration? How can I infuse a little bit more joy? How can I infuse a little bit more love and more understanding of self, so that as that phase of life, as that career ends, there's a lot more wholeness. There's a lot more, um, yeah, like fondness
Yeah,
from
more
the experience.
position, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you something, if you don't mind. How were your parents through your journey in the beginning of your figure skating career? I'm really excited to get to some of these things throughout. I mean, there's so much interesting stuff you're saying and talking about. But if you go back to the very beginning, I mean, you said you started at 13 months old, and you said you loved it in the beginning. Was there ever a point where your parents started to kind of push, or were they always very supportive and let you kind of love and flow it? Did the pressure come from you? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know my mom is watching this, so I got to be a little careful. Just kidding. Hi, mom. Um, my parents were always supportive. Skating was my choice.
Hmm.
And that being said, I was a kid.
Hmm.
So there were times that pushing was necessary. There's a lot of financial investment, time investment, energy investment. It puts a lot of strain on the, it puts a lot of strain on the entire family unit, And so within that, if I'm not living up to my end of the bargain, of course, there's going to be some pushing, and there's always the ironing out those wrinkles along the way. I would say I feel very fortunate for the way that I experienced my sport, and then within that, of course, there were aspects that were challenging, surrounding pressure, and a lot of that pressure came from
From
myself
yourself,
too.
huh? Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering. Um, it's so hard to kind of, especially as you said, kind of became your identity for so young, at such a young age. It becomes, if in your identity, you don't want to be a failure, you want to be a success. And so there comes a lot of pressure with that. At what age do you think figure skating really started to become a part of your identity, and you looked at it as this is who I am, or others looked at it as this is who you are? Do you remember?
Somewhere between 5 and 10 is
And
my
did
guess.
you ever want
I call it 7.
that? Did you ever want to break out of that?
No,
You loved it.
I loved it. Yeah, I loved it. I mean, I wouldn't have kept going otherwise. I grew up in the 90s, 80s, 90s in Canada as a male figure skater. It was, there were times that were tough. There was, yeah, some bullying, some ridicule, energy that was put towards me that would make someone want to
Mm,
stop. And um, in some ways, I'm grateful that I had those experiences because it really taught me resilience and it really taught me to dig deeper into seeing that what I want is more important than what they think.
mm.
And also, there were aspects of that that I never fully healed and integrated, and they were playing in my subconscious for a lot of my life. And it wasn't until much more recently that I started to address them.
How do you go about addressing that? And how do you kind of solve those past wounds and situations from in your opinion or in your approach?
I think solve is a bit of a complex word because it implies that you get to the end.
Right.
And I I don't really see healing and growth as having a destination, more as being a trajectory.
Yes, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's this idea, this realization that whatever happened to me, I'll speak on my behalf. Whatever happened to me happened for me. And so I can continually tap into those
Mm,
teachers.
mm,
And as I evolve and as I grow, those teachers present new lessons as I go into deeper layers. It's kind of like the spiral. You come back to the same point on the spiral, but you're further away from the center. You're further along on your journey. So it's kind of like that wound 2.0, that wound 3.0 is
right.
kind of how I see it. Um, and really, it's just a willingness to really look in the mirror.
Mm.
It's a really it takes courage, it takes will and resilience to really sit and be with yourself, to compassionately and lovingly like step back and objectively look at the ways in which you be and start to get curious as to why.
Do you think that you need a certain level of pain or I guess heartbreak to really look yourself in the mirror, or is it something that you think maybe we can kind of help people get towards or um, guide towards, if that makes sense? In your experience, when did you look in the mirror and really start to work on some of the things and some of the pain from figure skating or just your journey?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it needs to be brought on by pain.
Mm,
That's the only way to look in the mirror. I think those things happen sometimes as a deeper reflection, like life is just reflecting to us the series of events, the cause and effect of our actions and our choices, and um, it starts to speak louder when we haven't listened.
mm.
um, so anywhere along the journey is a perfect opportunity to look in the mirror, to really wonder. I mean, if you take this to the athletic mind, the desire to consistently find ways and areas to improve upon, why can't we approach that with our own way of being, like an Olympic human, for lack of better
Yeah.
terms, why can we not consistently see and receive life as being like a positive feedback, just offering as a gift, like, hey, here's a reflection. Here's an opportunity to learn and grow and improve and expand. Um, for me, at the end of my career, right before I retired, I had a 200-pound mirror fall on my face.
Wow.
I don't know if there's a more literal metaphor of, like, look at the reflections. So I often wonder like what aspects of life were trying to show me before that happened.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
one approach to looking at it. And even after that, it took me some time to really get in there. I'd go in and out, in and out. Like I'd look and then I'd turn away from the things I didn't really want to look at. And yeah, those aspects of life, they find ways to speak louder until we listen. And I think a beautiful aspect of sport is that it's like life condensed under a
Mm,
microscope.
mm,
So we have these opportunities uh, to learn in real time because things happen so fast, and with the pressure and with the like insane amount of skill required and the insane amount of grit required, we really get to see where we're at. And I think there's an opportunity there that a lot of athletes miss out on. I'm not going to say all, but a lot of athletes miss out on is the growth as a human being can happen in tandem. We don't have to suppress our emotions to be strong. We don't have to push away the things we don't want to
mm.
see to be able to perform well. In fact, those are like auxiliary programs running in the background that are eating up energy. We're constantly like doing a task while carrying a backpack full of boulders, you know? Whereas if we took the time to like put the backpack down and go through the boulders and let go of that weight, maybe take a Polaroid picture of the boulder so we have the memory, we have the lesson, but leaving the weight behind, we create freedom. So I think there's an opportunity there to see that the growth as an athlete, the growth as a person happen together. And within that, there's a lot of fulfillment available.
Well, it's funny you mention this because what the literature says is that one of the biggest performance enhancers for athletes is actually mood, optimal state of mind, and purpose, aka fulfillment in a lot of ways. So you're right in that a lot of athletes do kind of suppress so much that it impacts their mood when the literature points to the opposite. We're just not very aware of it. You know, the literature points to state of mind, mood, your overall fulfillment, purpose. Uh, yeah, what your state of being is in will is one of the greatest performance enhancers for tennis or for sport in general. So it's very interesting. Yet a very standard norm that in highly competitive environments, not just sport, is to very much be miserable because you are suppressing so much and oppressing so much. So it's very interesting what you're saying. I'm listening to it and I'm wondering, is that how you see it in your experience as well? Do you see that as if you were to have taken a more holistic approach to your development as an athlete, would that have enhanced your performance, or did you, or or did you need to, or do you feel like you needed to go and be hard and put hours in and be in this state of mind? What are your thoughts on that?
And I think that's the golden question. Um, yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate. I had kung fu through
Mm.
my career. It was
Well, I
really
Krav Maga.
and, and Krav
Yeah.
Maga. Kung Fu started, I worked with Glenn Doyle, who was Elvis Stoiko Sifu, his master, and he was instrumental in helping me to 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 gain the confidence and the mental clarity. I mean, I was having all sorts of experiences that were almost borderline spiritual, but I didn't really understand. I was just felt connected and centered and still for the first time in my life, and that really helped me. And then I worked with Sue Wilson, who you also know, who was completely, massively instrumental in my ability to at least access uh, understanding the brain as a muscle, how to train it. Now, within that, I think there's the understanding that we're still looking at the mind and the brain and the body as something to push to do something. On some level, we're enslaving ourselves for for this cause, you know? It's like a Marxist kind of approach of like the ends justifies the means. And it
Mm,
doesn't matter if we're unhappy. It doesn't matter if we're injured. It doesn't matter if our health is declining, despite the fact that, we're physically super capable. Um, it's all worth it because we're achieving something that we're told is super important. And often, even if we chose it, we didn't really choose that belief. Like our society put forth into our minds. We grow up with advertisements, we grow up with television, we grow up with first tennis school you go to, the stars are talked about. This idea of celebrity culture, right? It's there in all of our minds. So on some level, are we really choosing this life freely?
Hmm.
And and then within that, what parts of us are we willing to sacrifice to achieve this thing?
Right. It's funny. Over the past week, I don't know why I've been thinking about this, but if you if you stop your journey at the sport and you don't go beyond, I'll take tennis for example. At the end of the day, what does it mean to become a great tennis player? It means at the end of the day, on a very micro scale, it means to be great at using a tennis racket and hitting a yellow fuzzy ball over the net inside some lines. And we admire the best in the world that can use a tennis racket, hit a fuzzy yellow tennis ball over the net inside some lines. And many people dedicate their whole life to this, and certainly their whole childhood. And I've been battling this challenge of that can't be that can't be the end goal. You cannot be on your deathbed and just be able to say I became great at hitting a yellow fuzzy tennis ball inside some lines.
Yeah,
What is that to
a
do?
hundred percent, 100%. Yeah. I mean, look, figure skating, I strapped like knives on my feet and wore some spandex and sparkles and lifted a small human around the ice while some people judged me, many of whom had never done those things I did.
Right.
Um, it's ridiculous. I
It's ridiculous.
think it's a little bit ridiculous. It's comical,
Right.
what we do as humans. And where I think the beauty lies in it is the
Right.
character building, right? It's an opportunity to really meet ourselves and to share with humanity the depth of the human spirit, what we are capable of within our being of will and grit and determination. It inspires us. It inspires each other. These things are beautiful. And sport gives us that. I think where we get lost is forgetting which one is the priority.
Yes. You nailed it. You nailed it. So I said I gave examples because I had this conversation. I said, but now what Agassi did is he became the best holding a tennis racket, hitting a yellow fuzzy ball over the net inside some lines. And then he used that platform and that impact 5 years later to build schools for children in Africa.
Mhm.
Okay, I get that. I get that. You became an Olympic silver medalist and you used your journey and your lessons to go and do what you're doing now and to go help people and go kind of see a bigger picture. But for many others, it does stop at the with the blades and the spandex and the sparkles. It does stop there, and that's what's interesting. And then you're lost. I think one of the things that really helped myself with my transition out of playing was almost a bigger purpose very soon after. I mean, and for some people, you have to take that time to find it. But once you do find more and more and more on your path to your journey and your purpose, and maybe even a bigger, better purpose, which actually shouldn't be that hard if the purpose before was just becoming great at holding a tennis racket, hitting the yellow ball over the net inside some lines. But it's very interesting what you're saying because I think you nailed it. The greatest thing about what we did was not what we did. It was the character building, the life lessons, and maybe the social relationships we built along the way. And so if that's the greatest thing about it in hindsight, 2020 vision, it's it's a shame to lose priority of that through the process. No?
Yeah, I mean, this is this is like the dance. There's the commitment to create something incredible. Like you take figure skating, for instance, it's an art as well. So
Yes.
some of the best skaters to have ever lived have left
Mm-hmm.
legacies of performances, of art, of
Mm-hmm.
moments. Some of the best tennis players have left these legacies of moments of even like career spanning chunks of time that were moments, you know, and that's all incredible and important and beautiful, and it's like a gift to humanity. However, it's also really interesting to look at where did that energy come from? What was driving that energy? And when we see athletes who win and do good things, but you can see that there's something
Missing.
inside of them, they're not happy or they're unwell or they're making choices that are kind of self-sabotaging. And you know, I've gone through phases like that in my life too. And I've had to really look at like this drive became so strong and it became like an engine that it didn't matter what I put in it as long as it was running, you know, and that was like sacrificing myself. And what I've come to find is like this idea we're not human doings, we're human beings. And to me, how can we really know our true purpose, our true desires, if we don't know who we are as a being
Mm.
before a doing?
How do
And then once we find that more clarity as what ignites us as a being, the doing becomes a clearer path, right? It comes from within. It's just like this whole body yes, as opposed to the mind like justifying this and I'll make more money there or I'll be seen there or like you know, the rationalization of the mind is really powerful and it's a very useful tool. However, without a compass coming from inside, we can get lost pretty quick.
mm-hmm. How would you even go about starting that process from being a human doing to a human being? How would one even start that process?
It's challenging. I, you know, I'm living in Costa Rica now, and part of what brought me here was I came down on vacation and I spent 3 months here,
Mm,
and I just stopped
mm,
doing things,
mm.
and it was
That's
really hard. I started to realize, like, you know, when you get off a treadmill and you stand still and you feel like you're still moving, that's what I felt like. Like my body and my mind were so anxious to keep driving and I
yeah,
didn't realize how much internal pressure there was to keep going. And what it was doing was it was distracting me from looking at a lot of the things I didn't want to look at.
right.
And so it was sitting and being and then getting curious, you know, journaling, asking myself tough questions and giving myself the safe space to answer them truthfully and meditating, just being in stillness. You know, this idea of meditation, a lot of people try. I tried meditating. I can't do it. My mind's too busy. It's like, well, that's not what meditating is. It's not stopping your mind. Like monks live in caves their entire lives trying to get
Mm,
there. You know, it's about sitting still and
mm,
observing the mind
mm-hmm.
and listening. And then through that stillness over
You
time,
get back.
truths start, yeah, they start to arrive. So it's just kind of setting the intention to want to learn you.
So I'm glad you brought up meditation because this is something that I feel like I massively needed to do more when I was a player. I started getting into it over the past year, I would say, and I've recommended it to pretty much all of my players ever since because what I kind of realize is that when you're meditating, what you're really doing in a lot of ways is learning to control your mind rather than have your mind control you. And so that's the very essence of what we need to be as competitors. We need to be able to better and better and better control our thoughts, not, oh, it goes into the negative, boom, bring it back. That's a practice. And you're right. Many people say meditating's not for me. I go and I'm too busy. Well, that's the point. You need it the most. You need to learn to control your mind the most and to work at eventually going back to the breath, going back to the breath. I thought it was such a useful performance training drill in many ways. But what I just find so interesting is, Mo Gaudat, if you've ever heard of him, He was the chief business officer at Google X, and he basically wrote the book Solve for Happy. And he said, now I executive coach some of the brightest minds in the world, and I'm still amazed at how dumb they are. I'm amazed how dumb they are because the brightest minds in the world, they haven't even figured out the right question to ask. They can solve all the problems, but they haven't figured out the right fundamental question. They're 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 serving their life to solve the problem of how to maximize net worth and success and status, when the real question this whole time was, how do you maximize net fulfillment? You know,
I mean,
and
now we're getting into like societal value systems, which I
right.
think are not separate from sport.
Well, well, so one of my theories, and it could be very wrong, is that if we did solve for net fulfillment, we would all switch into the careers we really were meant and want to be in. And then we would become purpose driven instead of money driven. And that purpose driven would shoot us to be 10 times, 20 times more impactful than to be money driven or status driven. That's a theory. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's a theory. Love your
I
thought.
yeah, it's a theory I resonate with. I feel, unfortunately, our society has this kind of view of what is valuable and what isn't, and we grow up having to morph ourselves into a one of, call it 20 boxes, and we're very resilient and malleable beings. But within that, I believe we all come in with a very unique and specific blueprint,
Mm,
something very special to offer the world.
mm.
And the journey of life is discovering what that is through these rites of passages, through these trials and tribulations, through these, aspects of life that challenge us to wake up to the things we're not awake to, And so within that, now we start to see, oh wow, this is what comes to me. This is what feels real. This is what feels right, and it's a choiceless choice. So it's looking at our ways as human beings and changing the currency to fulfillment, to joy, to truth, to kindness, to acceptance of each other, to look at all these different expressions of human beings and celebrate that. How does that all fit? How can we accentuate um, our experience as a collective here by welcoming in and celebrating all that's there?
Yeah, and I really don't think you can solve that. I don't think you can realize your purpose or listen to your calling or what's driving you inside without going inside. I think people can spend their whole life chasing net wealth, net status, and never once consider, where is my net fulfillment. I think they can spend their whole life, and the only way they can, and the reason being is because they never went inside and they never listened to themselves, and they kept being a human doing instead of ever being a human being.
Right.
It's very
Well, and you kind of wonder, like, what does it feel like to win the game you think you're playing, but realize you've lost the game you were actually playing?
wow. Can you explain that further?
We've we've been fed this idea that net worth, that notoriety, that kind of success means you've won at life, and you can do it all right and have all the things you're supposed to have in order to attain fulfillment, joy, satisfaction, all these things that are sold to us, and get there and not be any happier.
Mm.
In fact, sometimes less happy. So, what does it feel like to commit to the game, play by the rules you're given, and win, and realize that the actual game of life had a different set of rules and you've been in a way misled?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's sad and funny at the same time. It's ironic, I guess, is a better way to put it.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant, and that's one of the reasons why, we launched the Mindset Academy um, about half a year ago, and I know it's been so much more fulfilling. And one of the reasons was because I believed, and we believed, that what we really wanted to do was not just impact, the yellow fuzzy ball hitting person. We wanted to impact the person because when your career's all said and done, you can't take, in our case, forehands and backhands with you, but you can take your mentality, you can take your life lessons, and to some extent, you can take your social relationships. And through the Mindset Academy, we get to impact the person directly. But weirdly, it also has an even bigger impact than impacting forehands and backhands to the actual player
Hmm.
itself. It's weird paradox that comes with following your calling and listening to your higher purpose. It's very interesting, because what does create a great figure skater? Is it someone who's great on the blades, or is it a type of being? Is it a type of person? Is it a type of mentality as a foundation first? It's that question between talent or mindset, and obviously they're both very important, but which is the foundation? Which doesn't operate without the other? You know,
That's a complicated question to answer
right?
because each individual has a unique recipe of a combination of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think the problem is that if they are a good figure skater, then we say it was right. Is it? Have they reached their maximum potential as an athlete and as a human being if they're not in alignment with themselves and not their character isn't walking a path of yeah, moving towards their greatest expression as their potential as a human being. Um, I think it really comes down to the why. Like
Mm-hmm.
the why is probably one of the biggest questions we can ask. Like, why am I doing this? What is driving this? What is the inspiration? Because and energy is everything. Everything is energy in this life. Like everything is vibration, everything is moving, everything is energy. Energy is felt. You can walk into a room and without even seeing who's in there, without even talking to anyone, you can feel something. Energy is definitely there. It's like when sometimes in a big match, the court feels electric. There's energy. There's something there. And the energy that we put into the intentionality and the attention that we put into what we do inevitably affects the energy of that thing. So that's the foundation to me is like the intention, the attention, the love and offering towards the growth of that thing we're trying to build. And it's kind of shifting things from a result oriented focus to a process oriented focus. I'm winning if I'm processing right. It doesn't matter where I get to. Am I doing the thing in the way that feels like the highest expression of my
Mm-hmm.
character? Because then the result will work itself out.
Right.
Because even if you lose a match or you lose a competition or whatever it is, how are we supposed to know that that's not the most important loss of your career? And if your process is in alignment and you've learned how to learn, you've learned how to receive these lessons with humility,
Mm.
with gratitude, with
Yes.
maturity, that becomes an incredibly effective teacher. But if we haven't learned how to process, it just becomes a loss. And now we start self-sabotaging, which can turn into future losses, right? It's all cause and effect. It's all reflecting. Like everything is a mirror. Everyone is a mirror. So we have the opportunity to look and see.
You said something incredible there. How do we not know this is the most important loss of our life? I think that's such an amazing way to look at it. How do you not know that this is the most important loss of your life? How do you not know that this loss is going to be the springboard to massive, whatever you define as achievement? That's a really great way to look at it. That's part of the whole principle. Everything in life is for you. But going back to how, you know, energy, you can feel energy. Energy has its impact. I really believe that. I mean, a great example is like, and I want to ask you this: why is it, in your opinion, that you know if I'm looking at you and someone was behind me looking at me, I can for some weird reason feel them looking at me.
We're going to get into a different realm of conversation. I mean, I think we are far more connected than we are
Right.
disconnected. I think, if you getting outside of this just like three-dimensional physical kind of experience, we're all made up of the same stuff. We're like a small set of circumstances away from being each other. And life force, consciousness, awareness exists in all
Mm.
of us and all and we are so much more alike. Our experiences have themes that relate to each other. And we also have, I mean, look at animals. They're so aware of their surroundings. Some of them have much less eyesight than we do, have better hearing or better smell or whatever it is, but you can tell that they're attuned. We are so in our heads. There's so much noise that our attunement is often blurred out, right? So when you look at our ability to really drop in to feel connection, when you sit and have a conversation with someone and you truly allow yourself to take them in and listen, not like, oh, I've got something to say about what they just said, I'm going to hold it and I'm kind of listening the rest of the way, but like truly listening, truly receiving someone, like truly opening your mind and heart to seeing this other human being
Mm.
fully. There's this level of connection that kind of dissolves separation on some level, which is where I think we can feel like we know someone through a television
Yeah,
screen.
that's incredible. Yeah, and it creates a kind of ease and a flow, certainly. Yeah, and I believe that. I believe that. I mean, just through that example, and all that you're talking about. With that being said, this is where I believe that the importance of ethics becomes fundamental, and being ethical when no one's watching is fundamental because we are all connected. And so, what you do behind the scenes when no one's looking does have a rippling effect and an impact on this whole universe and this world. How you treat nature, I used to be, I used to not be aware of this thing, and I talked to you about this last week, and then all of a sudden, like, I see a piece of garbage, I pick it up, I got to put it away, because yeah, I think I've become a little bit more aware to that we are all connected and everything does matter in a weird way, and how you treat the earth is really how you treat yourself because we are a piece of the earth. It's so interesting. I mean, I think it's so interesting, and I think what's funny is you talk a lot about gratitude, appreciation, connectedness. If we were to take that to even our performance, the part of the reason I'm tying it to performance right now is obviously so many people on here are in the performance realm and field, or who will listen to this. But if you can take this approach, how you treat your equipment, how you treat your court, how you treat yourself, how you appreciate being able to do something that is more than survival mode. I talked about this yesterday. If you're standing on a tennis court, you have no problems. There are so many people around the world way worse off, and you have to meditate on what an incredible opportunity and how lucky and fortunate you are to be able to do what you're doing. We have to meditate on this. And if we don't meditate on this, which is essentially what you're talking about, going inside, we never come to this awareness or realization, and we never achieve deeper and deeper gratitude, which does impact performance and does impact the quality of our lives, but also we're connected, the quality of everyone's life and the quality of this environment and this universe. And I think you have such an incredible way of articulating that and understanding that I know that you're making massive impact on not just the people who follow you, like I said you were to me, which is part of the reason why I wanted to have you on, but also the athletes and the people that you work with one on one and whatnot. I think it's brilliant.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? Like how does this apply to trying to be a tennis player that gets drafted to D1 or like ends up on the pro
Right.
circuit. It's all
Right.
connected, right? If you can take, this is what I think is the really fun and fascinating aspect of really going into this way of thinking. I have a dear teacher and friend, Vyacheslav, and he quoted me. He's quite a devout Buddhist, and he quoted me a line from the saying is that the life unexamined is
Right.
not worth living.
Right.
So what becomes really exciting to me is this like creative investigation of, okay, how does the perspective of how I'm connected to the earth relate to how I am on the
Mm.
tennis court or the field of play? How like in the investigation, we learn our mind, right? Like our mind is a computer that behaves in the way in which we programmed it to behave.
Right.
So when we learn it, we can recode it
Mm.
over time. And so every time, once that, I believe the awareness is like the gateway to expansion.
Hmm.
So once we become aware of that program that runs, that's out of sync with our potential and is a little bit self-sabotaging, we can see that and go, oh, that's where that is, and then choose differently. Even if you can't choose differently and you're still reactive in that moment, the awareness gives the opportunity to start to work towards a new way of responding. That then you get the moment to take a breath, and that space between the situation and your response, that
Right.
breath, is what changes it from reaction
Right.
to response. So within this exploration, we learn how to learn.
Hmm.
And I believe some of the best athletes in the world are some of the best students. And that's where it really becomes interesting. It's not just about hitting the tennis ball. It's not just about jumping in the air, turning a bunch of times and landing perfectly on one foot. It's like, how do I learn? Because life is consistently teaching me on and off the field of play. Like even sitting and looking, like, a lot of indigenous tribes, I'm going all over the place, but it all kind of ties together. A lot of indigenous tribes look at life through the lens of animism. And animism is this that idea that everything has a spirit. Everything is alive. Everything has a spirit, and therefore it can teach us. So if we sit and look at a tree, how does a tree be?
Mm.
How evolved of a soul must a tree be able to stand still for hundreds of years? How does it need to reach its roots down into the ground to go, like Carl Jung, a tree's roots need to reach into the depths of hell before the branches can reach for the
Yes.
heavens.
Yeah.
So how can we learn from the tree in which it embraces duality and goes into the shadow, into the darkness, and create stability from that, so then it can grow tall and strong and reach for the sky?
Hmm.
And then how does it transform light into food?
Well, one of the things Carl Jung says is you cannot be a good person without understanding your roots to hell and how
Right.
bad you can be. And so this kind of goes into what you're saying a little bit. It's very interesting.
Well, and then I think it's in the exploration of these things that we learn how to learn.
Mm.
And when we really learn how to learn, we learn how to, in real time, create our own reality. And so, as an athlete, when things are happening fast, the more we can train our mind to be completely aware.
Mm.
And we're in control of the mind as opposed to the mind in control of us.
Right.
Now we have a heightened ability to be in the driver's seat of this experience and make it more
Yeah.
interesting.
And that can be worked towards through meditation and practices of awareness. And what you're saying is so true, because how can we address a problem that we're not even aware of? How can we address a problem we can't even see? And so when you said the greatest athletes are also, or the athletes that reach their full potential are the greatest students, it makes sense, but it also attests to the importance of willing to be open-minded and to learn new things and to hear new things and to find a different way. And I talked to you about that. I felt like I was too close-minded in the beginning part of my career, and that had limited me in very many ways. And the
Mhm.
importance of being open-minded so that you can see potential areas of improvement or even potential areas that need to be addressed, and then you can address and evolve as a, further evolve as a performer, but also as a in your character.
Yeah, and this is where it becomes interesting, right? Because the ego wants to own everything good that's happened,
Right.
and to be open-minded to receive teachings
Hmm.
requires a level of humility.
Yes, you're right.
So it takes, like, if you look at the discipline it takes to train the body and mind to be able to do these things, it takes the same level of will, discipline, and grit to overcome the desire to not be humble,
Hmm.
right? It takes effort.
It does, yes.
It takes effort. So within that, you look at some of these like philosophical giants and spiritual explorers. It's like this constant desire to understand. And the more you know, the less you know, the less you know, the more you know. This like, when I think I know something and I stop learning from
Hmm.
it, I'm I've lost that thread. I put it
Marcus,
in a box.
Marcus Aurelius used to have a man behind him, a servant behind him, who constantly whispered in his ear, "You are just a man. You are just a man. You are just a."
I,
It's incredible.
well, we look at in our society, we look at people who reach big heights in different areas, and we always want to tear them down.
Mm.
We're looking for some reason that they're not better than we are.
Hmm.
And really, when you think about it, being in that position of quote unquote power, of having that level of influence, is a really hard place to be. It takes a lot of strength of character, a lot of discipline internally, so as an athlete, we look at the glory and we don't always see what comes along with that. And so, another layer of the importance of building the individual is that if and when they do arrive in a place where they have to hold that, their strength of character can help them hold that with grace and be a leader, not just someone who's good at hitting a tennis ball that people follow because they're like, look how good they are. It's like, oh, wow, this person does that really well. And also look at how they hold it. Are they humble? Are they kind? Are they compassionate? Are they see everyone as equal? Like all of these qualities are really desirable in someone who has influence.
Yeah, yeah. One of the first things I heard when I went to the University of Oklahoma, our head coach at the time, Nick Kroll, said to me, the more success we have, and we need to make this clear to our players, the more we need to stress the importance of being open-minded, and the more we climb the mountain, the more we have to contain our arrogance and actually increase our humility.
Yeah. I think there are good coaches and good leaders saying that. I think there could be more emphasis on it. I think there could be more
Yeah,
emphasis on it,
yeah.
and really addressing the mental health because they're not separate.
Well, I think there can. We believe how much this would impact performance. Our whole conversation today, a lot of the points, and what I talked to you about last week is that, we grow up in a school system that never teaches us to meditate, never teaches us the importance of going inside. All our society ever raises us and teaches us is to go be, go make as much money as you can, go achieve as much status as you can. That probably would all come into your life without even chasing it. Okay, and you wouldn't even care for it or want it if you reprioritize your values. You could go be. I guess we grow up in a society where we're not taught what you're teaching us right now. Even just even just to take 10 minutes to listen to ourselves and reflect on what do we feel the need to do.
Hmm. What drives us?
Mm,
And we grew up without YouTube, and we
right,
grew up in a society where mental health wasn't really talked about yet. And
right,
and there's much less excuse now. If you want to learn to meditate, you can go on
yeah,
YouTube and find a meditation.
yeah,
If you want to learn breath work, highly recommend breath work. There's Wim Hof, there's transformational, there's like all these different types of breath work that help the body activate, that help the body clear, that help the harmonize the energetic balance, the nervous system. Like all of these things are super valuable. There's so much information online, and there are schools everywhere. You know, if
Mm,
you're an athlete, why not go do a yoga class and learn from someone who sees moving the
mhm,
body completely differently
mhm,
than you do? And in their ability to attune the mind and the body together, right? There's another opportunity to learn how to learn. Am I forcing my body to do something, or am I listening to the subtle messages it's giving me and working with it? Now my intimate relationship with my body adjusts. Now, when I'm under pressure and I'm doing incredibly beautifully difficult things, there's a layer of trust there that maybe wasn't there before.
mm,
This is something I didn't really understand. I had a lot of trust, but I enslaved my body. I made it do the things my mind wanted. And then after I retired, I spent a lot of time stretching. It took me a while to get there. I was acting and modeling, so I was beating my body up even more to look a certain way. It was more of the egoic drive.
mm,
And then once I started healing this relationship with my body, I would I would spend like an hour, 2 hours stretching and like apologizing to each part of my body. It's just like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't listen. That this thing I needed was more important. And it's not that that's all bad. It's just this awareness gives us the opportunity to recreate the way in which we do these things.
yeah. Wow, there's so much gold in there. One of the things I am really excited about, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, but I'm excited because I know that the next generation of people you impact, you're going to tell them, you're going to introduce them to meditation. I know that's certainly been the case for me. I've told a lot of our high performers that we're associated with practice meditation. Maybe that might be one of the first fundamental things I'll say to them, because if you cannot learn to better and better control your thoughts and your mind, then it will control you. When I don't know if this is true for you, but those that we learned from never ever brought those words up or brought these things up. And so I'm excited for the future, because I believe that we will stress these things as generations unfold.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, I mean, you look at the philosophy of, well, they just don't have it. They just, like they just you either do it or you don't, and you don't have it if you don't do it. And then when you look at some kids with all the potential in the world and there's something sabotaging them inside their minds,
mm,
it's like, oh, what trauma or what limiting self-belief is playing there, that if that was actually alchemized and transformed into fuel for growth, what could they be, capable of? And what if they learned to work with their mind? What layers of waves of incredible athletes and humans are just waiting for this to reach
mm.
them, instead of just the ones that figure it out.
Yeah, and the old school way has such a limited amount of ways to address problems. And what you're really bringing to light is what I always say: creative solutions. You're looking at it through a different lens. We can solve, we can address this problem. I'm trying to avoid using the word solve, but we can address this problem. You know, let's try to address this problem. Well, the old school ways, yeah, you either have it or you don't. You're done. We
Yeah.
get rid of you.
Yeah. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I'm just getting out of the sun. I think it's also important for the coaches and the parents to understand this too, and that's not a call out. That's a
Yeah.
that's a that's a call to action. That's an inspiring, like, whatever programs we still have in our relationship to the sport, in the wounds or the unfulfilled desires that we had, whatever's still playing those programs, we're giving forward.
So one of the challenges with that is that, you know, parents or adults, you know, if you grow up closed-minded and stubborn, and that's 25 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years of being stubborn and closed-minded. It's such a new idea. Have you ever read the book The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle?
I've read chapters of it, yeah.
Okay. One of his things, and one of the theories he talks about is like, oftentimes, in order to make drastic enough of a change to put yourself in the right direction, you have to reach the point of extreme enlightenment, or in some cases through extreme suffering. And he talks about his story and how he became, quote unquote, more enlightened, in that it only happened. So it's very interesting, actually. He says that he was extremely depressed by the time he was 25 years old, and I think he was at Carnegie Mellon, or somewhere. I don't want to butcher that, but he was doing incredible things in the academic world, but he was extremely unhappy. Okay, and he was extremely unhappy, and he didn't know how to get himself out of this. And only until he got to the point of suicide that was it extreme enough for him to say, I either die or I need to change. And so he said his claim was that I needed to get to such a dark point in my life that I had no option but to change. And that if he did not get to that dark point, it goes back to what you said. You don't know if this is the most important loss of your life. If
Hmm.
you do not get to that dark point, maybe you never change and you suffer in this way forever. And that's my that's one of the questions I posed to you. Is, I mean, I've kind of gone off track, but how would you approach trying to better enlighten a 50 or 60-year old who's been doing things a certain way for 50 or 60 years? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
no, it's a great question. It's a really great question. I mean, if you can relate this to athletes, right? Like, let's say someone who's hit a forehand a certain way for 20
Yes.
years, and now you have to go rebuild it and rewire that entire pathway. Our behavioral patterns are the same.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of will to essentially watch parts of your reality dissolve. The you think you are, the world you think you live in, the willingness to let it go is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
And the longer we hold on to that safety, the more entrenched it becomes in our reality. I was working at a retreat center for the last 14 months. I'm no longer there now, but we had a lot, like almost 600 people come
Wow.
through, and people ranging from 18 years old up to almost 80. And and it was very fascinating to see the different aspects of life, the different phases of life, what they're traversing, and also like the willingness and readiness to change, to open up to change.
It's
It
incredible.
is. And at the same time, we all have a different level of resistance, yet we all have the choice. And if we look at it as change as an arrival at a destination, as an accomplishment, versus change as a trajectory, as a process, as an attitude, it's completely different. Once we've accepted taking the attitude of change, of learning, of growth, it doesn't matter where we're at on our path, we're on the path. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's step by step, breath by breath.
Mm-hmm.
We're learning how to learn, we're learning how to grow. And the more open we are, the bigger deaths of ourselves we can accept, right? Because every time we go through a big change, it's like a part of us we have to
Yeah,
let go of. A breakup,
certainly.
a job ending, a moving from a home, moving to another country. I kind of did like four of those all at once, and it was a massive death, and it was kind of like Eckhart totally talked about, terrifying.
Mm,
terrifying, and probably the most important thing that ever happened to me. I don't think it necessarily needs to go that way, but if you look at our modern society, we are lacking a rite of passage
mm,
in our culture. Many ancient cultures had rites of passage for young people built into their culture. People would go through these initiations of now you're becoming a man, now you're becoming a woman, and there's this like realization of stepping out of the adolescent mind into the adult mind, of taking responsibility for oneself, of learning how to grow, of learning that humility and strength of mind and spirit. Where many of us,
you're good.
many of us are living as adults with adolescent minds. Did you catch that?
Yeah, yeah. Processing.
Just there's a circle on your
Oh, God.
face, so I wasn't sure if it went there.
No, no, yeah. No, yeah, I was processing it all. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of things to unpack. I definitely believe that the opening of the mind is a form of letting go of that which you are so comfortable and used to, and that is a form of death, and that you have to be willing to undertake that in order to grow and shed new light. Now, did you ever happen to ask one of the elder people that came in what their motivation for coming in is? Or how did you finally get to the point where you felt like you were willing to come and gain a new perspective? Did you ever?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so inspiring to see someone that point in their life. A lot of it is a lot of it is acceptance with death, and I think this is another aspect of our society, is like a lot of our fears in total culminate in our fear of death, and wanting to learn to truly live this last phase of their lives through the acceptance of death. And so the metaphor and the symbolism available there is um, the death of the self, not just the physical self, but the death of the identity, the death of the ego, or the iteration of the ego, those it applies to all aspects of life. You can live for 10 years, you can live for 70 years, and still be at the same point of fighting acceptance of
Right.
inevitability, of change.
Yeah.
And so these initiations, or these ways of like surrendering, like the athlete mind, the warrior mind of never surrender. And it's like, well, what if we reworded that? Like the amount of strength and courage it takes to surrender
Surrender.
to what is gives you the freedom to create within that reality.
Yeah, it is incredible what meditating deeply on death could do for you. I mean, so I don't know if I told you this. I might have, but recently, someone that was very very close to me, uh, you know, had a massive health issue come back, and it made me really reflect and think about, because I just felt so much empathy and sympathy, and I was so sad and impacted by it. I really meditated deeply on what must be going on through their head in that moment. And if you meditate enough and hard enough on it, you start to really reevaluate what you're doing with your life, and how you're approaching things, and what you want to be doing, and ethical matters, and what do you feel is the right thing or the wrong thing to do. I think there's so much insight and perspective to be gained, with working towards meditating on that reality more and more and more, and working towards how to better accept that reality more and more and more. I mean, I know so many people that won't even watch documentaries or uh, movies on anything that would remind them of death. They don't. They want to. They want to ignore it.
Hmm.
They want to ignore that reality.
Yeah, think our Western society has a big fear of death. A lot of Eastern philosophies and societies, they have a different relationship with death. And I think in understanding a relationship with death, it can teach us how to live.
Hmm.
And then the relationship with that to sport is the fear of failure.
Hmm.
If we can acknowledge our fear of failure, if we can accept that we might fail, we
You could liberate.
open our, we can liberate
Yeah, you
and
can.
play freely.
Yeah.
Once you accept that that's a possibility and that's okay, you can you can fight from a place of like fighting because your character desires to squeeze out all that you can for that moment.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about the like, ah, what if I don't make it? It's just like I'm playing a game
Hmm.
and I'm having this beautiful opportunity to do something I love and to really get to know the depth of my will and the depth of my character.
One of the things that I learned in university was military studies,
Mm,
ironically. And one of the things you realize diving into this is that when the soldiers get to the point where they don't think they're going to live anymore, so when they're like, when they really believe, oh my God, I'm going to die in this situation, they achieve and do the most average normal person will achieve and do the most superhuman, incredible thing. And to further point to that, you the CEO of Airbnb, Brian Chesky, he, he's very close friends with Barack Obama. And one of the things he advises people to do is to live as if you only had 10 more years left to live at all times. So even when you're 90, to not live like you're going to die this year, to live as if you had 10 more years to live at every period of your life. And the whole purpose and the point of that is to help you navigate more purposefully. Because if you live as if you're invincible, which is in many ways when we ignore that reality, we then create, kind of a segma in our brain that we are invincible. You don't live purposefully. You live unintentionally in very many ways. And the problem why he says 10 years and not 1 year, or this is your last day, is because, well, then, you don't live kind of long term enough. I mean, there has to be a certain balance between the two. But I think what you're talking about is so true. I mean, when you accept the worst case scenario in competition, it's like living your second life. You can finally, perform as if you have nothing to lose. You're free. You can be the best, fullest version of yourself because you don't hold back.
hmm Totally. And I learned that the hard way. I didn't gift that to myself in my last few years of competition. I was very aware of my desire for certain results and frankly what people thought, and I stole my joy
Mm.
from a lot of those experiences. And they've taught me a lot. They've taught me a lot. They've taught me a lot about humility. They've taught me a lot about the way I allowed myself to behave and justify because of what I was struggling with. Um, and, I'm grateful for those lessons. And we also have to hold ourselves accountable for learning those lessons,
Well, it's
and
very difficult in your situation because let's say you're at the Olympics. You just don't know if this is your last Olympics, for example. And so you want to get it right now. And that brings a lot of pressure. I mean, it is a fear of loss and death in some ways because you just don't know if you're going to have the chance again. How do you, if you could go back, how would you battle? Obviously, you achieved the silver Olympic medal, which is just unbelievable. But if you could go back into those moments, as you said, I mean, you see it a lot with NCAA players in their final year, and they just have the worst year because all they're thinking about is it's either now or like I have to do this now, and they put this so much pressure on themselves. how do
yeah.
you how do you address that?
In Buddhism, they say that the root of all suffering comes from attachment. So we create our own suffering from our unwillingness to accept what is, from this desire, this gripping on how it's supposed to be, on changing it.
Right.
And so looking at that, how much suffering are we creating for ourselves? How much energy are we wasting on worrying about the future, which hasn't even happened yet? It's a figment of our imagination. Can we really trust that part of our mind? You know, can we honor it and say, thank you for trying to protect me from pain?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm I'm going to live in the now. You know, I'm going to learn from that, and I'm going to learn from the part of my mind that dwells on the past because it wants me to learn those lessons too. But I'm going to live in the now. And I think gratitude is a beautiful gateway into the now. I have this experience. I have this opportunity, and, and I may want this result. Can I find gratitude for whatever comes my way and turn it into something that creates a beautiful life?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that holds true because the suffering coming from attachment is perhaps coming from the fact that your attachments are uncertain. You can't control them. We don't know if, we don't know what's going to happen to what we're attached to. It may leave our life, and that brings us so much suffering and unease and uncertainty. And so if we could work towards, it's very hard to ever achieve the goal, but if we could work towards better and better detaching from that which we don't have control over and attaching to that which we do. So instead of prioritizing and valuing what we have, but rather prioritizing and valuing what we become, that's something we will carry for us forever. And there is a certain level of certainty in that which could bring some more comedy and peace, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we can also choose to laugh at all of this,
Yeah.
right? Like there's 8 billion of us on the planet. All of us think our situations are so
Hmm.
important. And it's not that they're not. Every single experience is equally important, very important. And at the same time, the trivial things that we obsess over, when you look at the, if you, all of these things just help with perspective.
Right.
If you zoom out and look at the span of time that we are here, it's like less than a blink of an
Oh,
eye.
yeah. No.
We're here and then we're gone in this iteration. Whatever you believe, if you have one life, if you believe you have multiple lives,
Yeah.
regardless,
Yeah.
everything is changing,
Yeah.
period.
It's a drop in the grand scheme of of existence as a whole.
Right, right. So, can we use that perspective to enable us to choose the attitude, to choose the process of life that we want to have, which gives us fulfillment, which
Yeah.
brings us the opportunity for joy, which brings us the opportunity for gratitude, even in the hard moments,
Right.
saying, thank you, I'm alive and I can experience this human life with all of the spectrum.
Yeah. It's an experience. It really is.
Mhm.
It's like going for a ride. It's, there's scary parts of a roller coaster, but you're just so pumped to experience this roller coaster. It really is a bigger a bit bigger a macro scale of a roller coaster in some ways, which people love. That people learn to love going on roller coasters. It's an experience.
And which is why being an athlete is such an incredible rush.
Hmm.
You really experience the amplitude of that roller coaster.
Right.
If you can choose to see it as that, like this is an
Right.
experience. And I have the privilege of experiencing this experience through this set of circumstances, the loss, the heartbreak, the struggle, the challenge, the elation, the glory, the focus, the moment
Hmm.
to moment, the arc of a career, like, you know, all of these things are really incredible. Can we find the teachings in there that are so rich that help us to live a really colorful life?
Dylan, man, you're incredible. This has been an experience, and I'm really super happy to have been a part of it, and for you to be so open, man. You're incredible. I really appreciate your willingness to share and all your perspective. You can tell, one thing you can tell is that you've really spent your time reflecting philosophically and thinking deeply about some of the more, I guess, in my view, important problems. And I appreciate that because I think that's rare. I hope more and more and more dive into that. I'm trying to dive into that more and more and more. And that's why it's so meaningful for me to kind of hear you and learn from you.
Thank you for saying that. You know, I don't, nobody owns any thoughts or wisdom. It's just tuning into what arrives. And I'm on my journey, just like everyone else. And I feel compelled to share and inspire others to find their own answers and find their own way. So thank you, you know, for inviting me on and having this conversation with me, for your own curiosity and your own journey and what you're doing to help athletes. Yeah, I'm grateful for it, and it's inspiring. So, you know, keep doing what you're doing.
Oh man, you also, and we'll stay in touch. And you know, you got a friend in me, and you know, just don't hesitate. But yeah, you know, if I can ever support, you know, that I will. You know, and I really, really appreciate you spending all your time and doing this with us. It was so enlightening. You know.
Likewise, I love these conversations. I think they're important, and happy to be part of them.
Thanks so much, Dylan.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's keep in touch. We'll keep in touch.
Sounds good.
Okay, cheers, Dylan. Thanks so much again.
Thank you.